Welcome to the Lost and Found podcast. I'm your host, Amanda. Join me each week as I rediscover my life's meaning, my passions, and my place in this world after leaving behind the only dream I've ever known. If you're dealing with self-loss, identity changes, career transitions, or you're still trying to figure out your life's purpose, then you're not alone. Join me. Wanderers are always welcome. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lost and Found podcast. This is your host, Amanda. I'm so excited to have you here. And if you're new here, welcome. This is a place for all the wanderers as they try and bridge the gap between who they are and who they want to become. So I'm so glad that you're joining me on this journey. This is a show where I share my own personal self-growth and my own trajectory as I kind of figure out what to do with my life's purpose after I left the only dream I've ever known. And welcome to me navigating my 30s in kind of an unpredictable way. But this is the best way that I've figured out how to kind of deal with all of those uncertain moments, difficulties with tolerating risk and fear and curiosity and creativity all into one. So I'm just welcome. Glad you're here. Today, we were supposed to interview a guest here in Nashville, but unfortunately, they had to cancel. So today, you get just me, and I thought we could talk about that exact aspect, right? The uncertainty of living in the unknown when you're trying to build something from scratch, having to deal with that risk and things going wrong or going haywire, and how to kind of recover from a difficult situation as you're going along with your life. So this was really a very unplanned moment. So I hope that I can get all my thoughts in order, which is why I have my laptop here with me today, right in front of me. But I'm flying by the seat of my pants. It's okay. I've never actually recorded a solo in the studio, so it's very different for me. Usually I'm at home, so this feels very legitimate. Anyway, get into it. This real-time lesson in how to tolerate uncertainty when you're, building a life that you're dreaming of, building your tolerance for the unknown, and, just embracing the human condition, right? So when I was driving to Nashville to conduct these recordings, I was listening to a different podcast. You may have heard of it, called the Liz Moody podcast, and she was interviewing a world-renowned journalist and author, Simon Stolzoff. And he was talking to her about all of the research that he did in uncertainty and insecurity and how people deal with and build a tolerance towards risk and how they can make difficult decisions easier, even if you don't know what the outcome would be with either decision A or decision B, how to make a choice between the two. And so I found that his podcast interview was absolutely fascinating, and I want to go and buy his books and read them because he got started talking about career decision making, and so how to know when to leave a job or stay in a job and build your career trajectory and what to do when career trajectories like that pivot unexpectedly. So he sounds like someone I would probably love to be mentored by, but in this particular episode, he was talking to Liz about how your brains, as humans, we are naturally wired to fear uncertainty more than actual suffering. And so he talked about a study where since the 1980s, this study was being conducted on people, and these people ended up preferring a guaranteed painful shock over the 50-50 chance of getting one. So people were more willing to go ahead and go through the pain versus sitting there in the chair and wondering whether or not they were going to get shocked. The fear of the unknown was so much more uncomfortable for them that they would rather suffer immediately, which I found super interesting. And he also talked about it, quoting his original book, where people were so fearful of the layoff that the fear of the layoff was as psychologically damaging as the layoff itself. It's very innate for us as humans to rather have the bad thing that we're so worried about go ahead and happen to us versus learning how to live in the present moment and be okay with whether or not that bad thing may or may not happen. And so that's not necessarily you being weak or ignorant or necessarily lost or incapable. It's just built into our biology already. And so it made me feel a bit more secure with my past self when I was in trouble or when I was being, upset or bothered or bullied at work and not being able to stand up for myself or not know how to do certain things or how to make certain decisions when I was younger. Because the truth was, I probably wasn't comfortable enough with that situation yet. I wasn't able to be tolerant of those types of situations. And it makes me super proud of the future version of myself that I became, right? Because older Amanda, wiser Amanda, now has more experience and can understand why younger Amanda did what she did, Uncertainty is only getting more and more prevalent for us in this day and age because so many crazy, tragic, chaotic, wild things have happened to us in the last, 5-6 years, right? You've had COVID, you've had wars break out, you've had cybersecurity breaches, you've had economic downturns, you've had the rise in living expenses and education issues and debates. And now we're back at war with Iran and all sorts of things, right? Our women's rights are being attacked in certain places. LGBT rights are being attacked in certain places. It's getting worse because you're constantly bombarded with your computer. Your cell phone is in your pocket all day long, and you're seeing all of these things happen to you. And so you're constantly bombarded with so many things that feel uncertain, so many things that feel outside of your control, so many things that are starting to either make you angry or ambivalent or fearful, and living in an environment of just constant anxiety. And so it can be really, really difficult, no matter how old you are, how experienced you are, how informed you are, to be able to make decisions about your life, because according to everything else around you, everything else that you're observing, it's a really, really scary place to be right now. So I'm hoping we can kind of unpack all of that together today a little bit and at least explain to you one of the personal things that has been happening to me over the last couple of weeks that taught me a lot about uncertainty and how people may have different tolerances for risk and uncertainty and how that impacted me. And then what I've learned from this podcast episode with Liz Moody and Simone. In the last couple of weeks, so just in the month of May, when we're recording this, May of 2026, I had a friend. I have two friends that I've made while I was living with my parents in East Tennessee. And one of those friends ended up going through a really bad breakup. And while me and the other friend were aware that things were going on and that our friend was unhappy, we weren't expecting the breakup to happen so quickly. And so about 3 weeks ago, we all met up to go to brunch. And when we picked our friend up, she told us that they had broken up that morning, a couple hours ago before we picked her up. She was kind of still in shock about the whole situation. And so were we, because we weren't expecting it. But because she lived with her partner at the time and it didn't end very well, she was asked to give the key back, and she needed to pick up a few things to take with her and figure out some place to land until she could figure out what she was going to do next. Because her job is in East Tennessee. It's in the area. So she can't immediately leave. And her family all lived in North Carolina. And so myself and our mutual friend, we offered her both places, hey, this is what's going on in our lives. You're welcome to crash here for a little bit till you can figure out where you're going or what you need to do. And so she ended up choosing to stay with me. And so I had a spare room. So I rearranged things, brought her in. She brought her dog. And we have been staying together for about the last 3 weeks at this point of recording. And so I would obviously offer to be there for her. She could use anything she wanted. She could stay at the house. She could take care of whatever she needed to take care of. But I was obviously moving to Tampa. And so eventually I had to pack up my house and I had to get things in order. And it was a short timeline that I could offer her. So in the amount of time that she was there, we started to talk about the breakup and how she was feeling and what she was thinking about what did she wanted to do with her life moving forward. And there were a couple of moments where she would come into my room and she'd start telling me about what had happened when she went back to the house and when she went back to pick up a couple of different things. And as she was packing and unpacking what she did have with her, she wasn't fully sure what to do next. She is younger than me and in her late 20s. And I think this would have been the first major breakup she had really been through. And I remember that moment. I remember, and not counting the high school romancy stuff, you stop holding my books in the hallway and holding my hand on the bus or whatever, not that kind of breakup, a genuine, heartfelt breakup in your 20s. I remember what that felt like. And I remember how devastating it was to lose your sense of self and lose your sense of routine. You get so used to being with someone, waking up with someone, seeing them in the morning before you leave for work and at night when you go to bed. They're there with you on the weekends. You share chores, you share responsibilities, you share family time, you share everything, right? And so to have that ripped away from you so quickly in a divisive and decisive moment can be very difficult. And learning to build a new routine after the fact is hard. It's really hard. And so in my typical Amanda fashion, I want to be caretaking. I want to be hospitable. I want to be welcoming. I want her to feel safe. And when she would sit down with me, I realized there were moments where she either wanted me to just listen, no advice, listen with a mix of advice, or she would ask me a direct question and then I would answer it with my personal opinion kind of thing. But every time I did that, I thought that I was giving her objective advice or objective things that you could do after this breakup or the decisions to make next, right? I try to ask her maybe probing questions, if you weren't worried about money or your job, where would you want to land? Where would you want to live? Do you want to stay here? Would you want to be near your family? Would you want to be somewhere completely different? Trying to get at kind of the core of her real desire in this moment. Because she had already made tried to reiterate, she had already made the very first step, which is the most difficult step of all. As we all know, when you're starting a new journey or when you're changing something about your life, the very first step is just to decide to leave, actually end it, actually get out of there. Step number 1, decide you are no longer going to tolerate what you do not want to tolerate. Step number 2, you get out. Step number 3, you figure out the rest as you go, as you can. And I tried to give advice that made sense based on my own personal experience and my own wisdom. I realized as I was listening to this podcast between Liz and Simone, your uncertainty tolerance is like a muscle. And so just like any muscle, some people have been training it a bit longer, and your tolerance for risk is very similar, right? Your capacity to handle the unknown is actually shaped by your age, your accumulated life experience, where your family's from, your personal childhood and your upbringing, your own attachment style. Are you secure, anxious, or secure, anxious, and avoidant? Avoidant. That's what it is. I'm like, what's the other word it's not me, the one that I'm not. Your own personal history with risk. When's the last time you ever took a leap of faith on your own? When's the last time you ever just listened to your intuition and you followed it directly, even if it didn't make any sense, right? And also your own level of self-confidence, right? How much confidence have you built over time through your own personal experiences, through your own previous breakups, through your ability to have self-trust? I realized looking back now, as I was listening to that podcast episode, I was feeding my friend what I would do, what I would have done, what 27-year-old Amanda would have done in that particular situation, what 27-year-old Amanda would have thought or wanted or desired, or how she would have thought through the problem. I don't think I was quite as equipped as I thought I was to help my friend think through the problem as herself. What would you think about this? What would you want? And The thing is, I know that she's probably struggling with the thoughts of, oh my God, I have to start over. Oh my God, I have to decide, like, I thought I was going to be with him, be with my partner. And now I've got to figure out what happiness means to me, what happiness feels like on my own, what I want on my own versus what I thought I wanted with him. And it's kind of terrifying if you used to be so enmeshed with someone else, pulling yourself apart. It's like undoing a knot of wires, right? Like when you go back every year to put up your Christmas lights, or if you have Christmas lights, if you celebrate, it's why it's so important to make sure that they're tied up separately, because if you go back, they turn into just a giant ball of nonsense and you have to untie them. I'm sure that's kind of metaphorically what it probably felt like in her mind and in her stomach. Like, I have to take this apart. The options in front of her probably felt like, do I stay with what's comfortable? Do I stay in the current town that I'm in and live with new friends, or go out and get an apartment on my own and stay with what I know? Or do I kind of take the risk and I go home and I put everything in storage and I think about finding a new job in a new city, or new in the sense like starting over there? Or you could even do the third option, which is what I tried to get her to explore a little bit more. You know, if money wasn't the problem, time wasn't the problem, where would you like to go? Where would you want to explore? What's something you've been thinking about doing for a long time? And like for me, that was how I kind of came up with the Tampa thing, coming up with Florida. Really, the dream was San Diego, but I can't afford California, and not even Californians can afford California. So living in San Diego is probably not the best idea. But that's why I came up with the idea about Tampa. You know, like I've always enjoyed it when I visit there. I have friends there. It's a little more my vibe and lifestyle choices. I feel like living with more sunshine and being able to be outdoors more would boost my own personal thoughts and self-worth and confidence and freedom. The feeling of freedom, to be able to be in a place where I feel like my future self can actually come forward. She can come to fruition the way I've wanted her to come to fruition. And I don't know that my friend had necessarily ever thought about her future self in that way. But when I asked her, you know, what would be your dream? And she said she wanted to travel. She wanted to go see different parts of Europe and the Scandinavian areas. She had always, you know, done a lot of research on those cities and those countries and found it absolutely fascinating. And she wanted to go explore and maybe work there for a few months. And I thought that was a great idea. I did not do like a backpacking tour or like the college break, you know, the year of backpacking in hostels and all that jazz in Europe. I never did that. I've only ever been to Europe with either friends or with my family. So I've never done a solo trip through there. But I know that, you know, through pop culture and books and personal experience, being able to travel on your own brings out a side of you that you probably never would have tapped into otherwise. And so I loved that answer. And I definitely tried to encourage her, like, yes, totally, do it. Move home, put all your stuff in storage, quit that other job, go try it out, see what happens for a month, you know, and then come back, right? See how you feel, see what you want to do. Because the jobs will always be there. You'll find something. And I don't know that leaving your job was actually really the right kind of advice to give my friend, because let's be honest, it's not a great time in the economy right now. And so I understand her hesitation and her fear about letting go of something that currently is a sure thing, even though it may not be her ideal job. It may not be the most fulfilling job, but it's helping her live and survive right now. So I understand that it's a very tough decision to figure out those things. So that's why I really loved this podcast episode that I listened to, because the host and the guest talk about these things, and they talk about how difficult it is to make these types of decisions, and they help you come up with counter questions to get to your own conclusion. So I wanted to kind of go through those things, and, you know, I wanted to relate it here that, like, I fell for the outsider looking in trap, right? I assumed that because she was asking for friendship advice, that I should give the friendship advice. But the reality is that I don't know that my advice was truly helpful because she has a completely different life from me. She has a completely different level of tolerance for risk than me. Because I have gone through breakups. I have been able to lean on my family when I needed to come home and lick my wounds. I have been able to have money saved and be able to live off of that money until I could find another job. Somewhere between 2017 and 2018, I had a job offer from the White House, and I was still a contractor at the FBI, and I left to accept that position because I had signed all the paperwork. I was just waiting on the start date. And the current contractor at the time that I was working for found out because my security clearance was being requested to be transferred from the FBI's database to the Executive Office of the President's database. And of course, the security officers in the FBI told my contractor boss. He pulled me in for a meeting and was very agitated about it. And at that point, I was pretty fed up. And so I put in my notice for the training date that I thought I was going to do for orientation. And it didn't work out. During the first Trump administration, the division that I was going to work for was dismantled in like 3 weeks between me getting that job offer and my start date. And there was nobody there to pick up my clearance. And so I kind of straddled, the life of non-work for about 6 months until I could get another company to pick up my clearance and bring me in for a new job. But those 6 months were absolutely terrifying because you're just watching your savings go down and down and down. And eventually I got a retail job at Ann Taylor. Anyway, the rest is history. But I was using my perspective and my frustrations and putting that on her, like internally. Like I never said anything to be offensive to her, but it was funny looking back now that I was frustrated with her not coming up with a decision about what she wanted to do quickly enough, right? Like that's so silly. Like, because when you're watching someone that you love not reach a conclusion at the pace that you're expecting them to, it's really easy to frame that other person as being stuck or behind or indecisive. But what's really happening is that the other person just doesn't have the same tolerance for that decision making that you do. They don't have the ability to tap into that third perspective and come up with what their future version would want to do or want to say to that answer. Usually what's happening when people are uncomfortable with uncertainty, they're doing one of two things. So they're on one end of the spectrum. They're either over gathering information. So they're researching everything. They're asking everybody else's opinion about what to do. They're running through the thought experiment over and over and over. They're coming up with every possible scenario that could ever exist. And they're making sure that they have all their ducks in the row for every single possible scenario before they fully make a decision about what to do. And then you have the opposite end where your friend could be rather impulsive and they could just be making a rash decision to try and make those feelings stop. Oh, well, we broke up. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to sell everything I own, put me and my dog in the car and just drive all the way to Seattle and start over. It's like, okay, do you want to do something that rash? What are you going to do when you get to Seattle? You don't have anything. You can't move into a place yet. You don't have enough money saved for a down payment on an apartment. You don't have a job in Seattle. Why Seattle out of all the places? You don't have family there. You know what I mean? So just the two different extremes are what does happen sometimes. More often than not, the vast majority of us are falling somewhere in the middle. But both extremes are bad because both extremes don't allow you to fully process what's happening to you. And they don't really give you the opportunity to make what could have been a better fit decision. I'm not going to say that you would make the right decision because nobody knows if you're making the right decision. Only hindsight can really tell you that. But The main thing here is that neither one of those is right. The over-gatherer, the over-analyzer of the information, where you get so much info, you get stuck because you're paralyzed by all the options, or you don't care about any option. You're just going to do what impulsively feels good so that you can avoid feeling the pain, feeling the anger, feeling the frustration, feeling the fear about what happened to you in that moment. But what they talked about in this podcast is that what your friend or the person you love that you're watching trying to make this decision, what they might actually need is just time to proximate to the experience, not really try and get advice from you or from someone else who has already made their own version of a decision for what they should do. And so you really aren't supposed to impose your own threshold for tolerance onto somebody else, your threshold for uncertainty onto someone else. Your friend or the loved one, they have to develop their own relationship with it. I thought this was a great topic for us and all the wanderers here at the Lost and Found, because that was the crux of this show originally. You know, these are the big life questions that are paralyzing us all day, every day, especially if you're a millennial and you're debating starting your life over and you're watching everybody, online talk about the great millennial career crisis or the great identity crisis or what's going to happen to us because we're upending and losing jobs and industries that are changing faster than we can fill them and learn skills for them. What are we going to do? And the younger and younger generations are getting more and more depressed and suicidal and lonely and disconnected. So, it's terrifying. And I'm still trying to, think of something else to say. But really, the big question is like, what the fuck? What do we do? So I know some of the most common ones that are probably paralyzing you, include things I've thought about as well. So should I move? Should I leave this relationship? Should I have kids? Should I change my career? Should I go out on my own or start just a side hustle that I use as a hobby? Like, how do I find an answer to what feels like is so deeply missing from my core here? And in the podcast, Simone talks about the distinction between acute uncertainty and ambient uncertainty, that there are two different main types. So acute uncertainty is an open question that will eventually resolve. You will eventually get that answer, right? Will I get this job? Will this person text me back? Will I pass my exam? There's a timeline set there about whether or not you will know those things, right? Will I get the job? You'll find out in a week to a month-ish after your interview. They'll send you a notice or you can reach back out to HR and get an answer. Will he text me back? No idea. Most likely not, girl. Keep moving on. But will I pass the exam? You'll find out. Your teacher will post the grades, right? Ambient uncertainty is more of kind of an ongoing soup of just unknowing what's really the essence of being alive in 2026 right now. So most of us are treating acute decisions like they require a level of uncertainty that we are just never going to have. And the truth is, living a life of absolute certainty is the fallacy. It's impossible. You're never actually going to know how your decision will turn out before you decide. And that's not a flaw in you. It's not arrogance or sometimes hubris, I suppose, but that's just the human condition. It's been a very interesting balance for me for what it's like to live with uncertainty, because in my old life, my identity as Amanda, the FBI analyst, my whole job was, the fog of war, smoke and mirrors, trying to identify what intelligence and what information I had in front of me was accurate, reliable, and could be useful for the particular decision maker that I was briefing that day. What did they need to decide? What did they need to know? And what were the gaps that they needed to be aware of? Not only their own personal biases, but in the intelligence in and of itself. Where are the gaps that need to be filled? What are the investigative courses we should take in order to fill those gaps as closely in as possible? And so in that professional aspect, I could handle uncertainty because I was supposed to be aware of it for safety reasons, right? For professional conduct reasons. But in my personal life, I wanted things to be normal. I wanted things to have an expectation and a routine and a cadence to a certain extent, right? But after a while, when all of that would start to build up and I have all that uncertainty falling apart in my professional world and my personal world, not knowing if I'd ever be happy, not knowing if I'd ever find the right relationship, not knowing if I'd ever be able to be married with kids or live near my family again, be able to see my family again, because back then it was during COVID when I was dealing with these existential crises. That acute uncertainty I could deal with, but the combination of having too much ambient uncertainty was almost too much to bear. And so I think moving forward, I may not know what the path is going to create for me if I decide to walk in this direction, to leave the FBI and start podcasting. Like, I may not know what's going to come of it, but I know how I would feel 80 years down the line, 50, 80 years down the line, if I had never tried. Would that version of Amanda, the future version of Amanda, when she's old and gray and can't do these things anymore, would she be upset for me not trying? And the answer was always yes. Would she regret me not leaving sooner? Would she regret me not trying to go out on my own and find what really made me happy, what I really wanted, like actually listening to what I cared about? And the answer was always yes. So I may not know what that path looks like yet, but I knew that letting those big life questions continue to paralyze me wasn't necessarily keeping me safe the way that my brain thought it was, right? Oh, I have so many decisions to make. I'm just not going to make one. So that way I can stay exactly where I am. I can be comfortable. I can be complacent. I can be okay with this certain community, this certainty that I am aware of. And if I had stayed, I don't think I would have made it to where I am today. I don't think I would be able to create what I'm creating now. I don't think I would have become as articulate or as connected to who I am as a person if I had let those big decisions paralyze me from making any kind of change in my life. So I want us to kind of think through the decision frameworks you need to use the next time these big life decisions come up for you, right? The way that my friend had to deal with her breakup and her next steps moves. But when you have a low risk tolerance and you have a low tolerance for uncertainty and it scares you, these are the kinds of things I think you should work through when you have an acute uncertainty question in front of you. Let's say you have a problem, right? We'll use my friend as the example. I'm going through a breakup. I need to figure out where I need to go next. What do I do? How do I think about this? So the first thing you would ask yourself, can you influence the outcome? Yes or no, right? Oh, I can only influence up to a certain point. We can't get back together, so that's out of the question. What I can do is ask my friends for help, ask my parents for help, figure out when I can rent a storage unit, where I can rent a storage unit. If I'm going to move, I can figure out when to rent a moving van, where to take it, where to drop it off. So the key here is figuring out how can you actually influence the outcome. Even if it's something really small, do what you can now, and then stop trying to control what you can't control. Next, can you prepare for multiple results? His main argument in the podcast was that you can contingency plan for a problem instead of clinging to only one vision for how this has to go. Maybe you thought, all right, I'm in this relationship. We're going for the long haul. It's going to be amazing. We're going to get married. We're going to have the kids. We're going to have an amazing, happy, perfect, beautiful, sunshine, rainbows, white picket fence life. Ta-da! Turns out communication breaks down. You guys go further and further apart from each other. It's like turning into roommates that are ships passing in the night in the hallway. The relationship breaks up, breaks apart, ends. When you were clinging so hard to that contingency plan of just one version of your life going, you don't really think through, okay, if in the future we break up, what could I do next? If in the future we separate and then work on getting back together, we go to couples therapy, we spend a year apart finding our way back to each other. Okay, that could possibly work. Or we break up, I start completely over and I do my whole version of eat, pray, love in your late 20s, whatever it is. You start your life over and you become the most vibrant, colorful, creative, connected, love-filled version of yourself. What's the worst that could happen? Have a contingency plan for that. And what's the absolute best thing that could happen because of that relationship ending? And have a plan for that. If you feel like you are prepared for multiple ways a scenario could go, it won't be so terrifying once one of those scenarios happens because you've already thought through, all right, this is what I would do for myself. It's more of an empowerment thought process framework for you to do. Another way to frame your question if you have a problem, like, all right, think about the only option test. So this is a test where if both choices would make you happy as the only option, then the decision probably matters a lot less than your anxiety is telling you it does. So the example that he gave in the podcast episode was, all right, you've been offered an all expenses paid vacation to Paris and a all expenses paid vacation to Rome. Oh no, each one has its pros and cons. Paris has this, Rome has that. You're gone for the same amount of time in both cities. You're with the same people in both cities. Everything is absolutely the same other than the location, but you're unable to decide which option you get to choose. Both of them sound super exciting to you. Both of them sound like they would have been great options. Okay, well, now you can only go to one. Let's say you can only go to Paris. If only going to Paris on your vacation would still make you very happy, then you know that it's mostly your anxiety that's telling you to be afraid of what decision it is that you're making. For instance, in the breakup version, right? Like if your idea is, oh my gosh, we've broken up. I don't know, should we get back together or should I start over? In theory, let's say you only get one option. You get back together and start over, or you go out on your own and you start over. And the only option that you were offered is go out on your own and start over, and you still feel really happy with that option, then it's okay and it's safe and it's all right to pick that instead of picking what maybe society wants you to do, which is just accept what you have because it's there and available, and you don't want to have a lost opportunity cost or lost investment costs because you have already spent so much time on this person. So I would think about that. The next time you're given a tough decision between two things, think about the only option test. Is it truly the two things that make you so excited? And either one would make you happy, and then it doesn't really matter which one you choose because you know you'll be happy in either scenario? Or is there really one of them that's actually pulling you? Is there one of them you're leaning towards more anyway? Because for whatever reason, deep down, you know that that's what you feel the most connected to. Then go for that. Because anything else that's trying to pull you apart while you make that decision is just your anxiety talking. And the only way to really dissipate anxiety is through taking action. Another thing that they talked about with those, big life decision questions and needing a framework for figuring out how to decide between them, they called this the one-way door options. So when you're deciding whether or not to get married, whether or not to have kids, whether or not you should move to a new city, the advice here for when you're dealing with a one-way door, so those are the decisions that are much harder to reverse. Getting married is great, but getting divorced is very difficult. Having kids is wonderful, but it will change your life in ways that you never probably expected and wouldn't really understand until you actually have them. Or maybe you're trying to make a major move and you're buying a home in a new city. Buying a home is great, but a lot harder once you've bought it to get out of it versus living in an apartment or a rented space. So the key here when you're making really tough one-way door decisions is to know thyself first. Understand who you are and what you really care about and what you really want. What are your values? What are the trade-offs that you're willing to accept or not accept in these decisions? You're not looking for the perfect answer for the one-way door, but you're choosing which imperfect trade-offs you're willing to live with if you decide to go through with that decision. And the only person truly that can answer a one-way door question is you. I can give you an opinion about what I would do in my one-way door decision, but at the end of the day, the only person who can really make that is you, because you are the one that has to deal with those consequences of living in the uncertainty. So two-way doors decisions are often the ones that are much easier to undo. We often treat the two-way doors as not permanent. And so we underestimate our ability to course correct because we're so used to having two-way door decisions all the time. But the truth is because you're making all those constant two-way door decisions, changing your business, pivoting your career, remodeling how you're going to do something, starting a new creative hobby, whatever it is. You don't have to do something forever if you don't like it, you don't enjoy it. That's all right. But we often are underestimating our ability to course correct because we're not listening to all that self-trust that we've built up throughout our life, throughout all the other decisions that we've made that have led you to here, right? So I would think through those things, the different frameworks. Can you influence the outcome? Can you prepare for multiple results, aka building contingency plans for different scenarios? Think about your only option test. If you only have one option, is it still the one that would make you really happy? And if it's not, then you know that you want the other decision to happen. Or are you taking your one-way door decisions more seriously? What are your values and what are the trade-offs that you're willing to part with? So you really don't have to be certain to commit to something. I really liked that topic that they kind of brought up there in that episode as well, that commitment is an act of trust, not of proof. So you are never going to know how a scenario is going to turn out before you decide what it is you want to do. And that's not a bug in the system. It's not your inability to see the future or your inability to be creative enough or think outside the box enough. It's just part of life, right? We're always going to be dealing with uncertain moments throughout your lifetime, no matter how old you are or how much experience you've had. You don't have to be certain to commit to something. Sometimes taking those really big, crazy, what feels like a really big, crazy risk in the moment ends up being one of those lifetime pieces, those blips in your timeline where you go, yeah, that pivoted everything. That changed everything. And for me, there were two, right? Most recently, the moment I decided and left the FBI, the moment I decided and started my podcast. So far, yeah, I think those are the two most recent ones that I feel like I have very clear blips where I go, yep, that changed my life. That changed my life. And I'm sure there are many more that'll come. The last thing I wanted to leave you with really was, in order to build a tolerance for uncertainty over time, one of the best ways you can do that is trusting your future self to solve your future problems. And I think this was one of the most powerful comments and moments in that episode with Simone, is that it comes from a place of mental health and balancing your present state of mind with your future state of mind. And this concept is from Emily Analt. And Emily shared with Simone that a moment where before she became a therapist, her mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And so everyone thought that she was going to die. And Emily was just drowning in anticipatory grief and fear, always consumed by the thought of, I don't know what I will do if my mother dies. I don't know how I'll be able to move on. I don't know how I'll be able to continue living without her if she's not here. And a family friend of hers, who happened to be an oncology doctor, asked her one day and said, how are you feeling? And she said, not really good. I'm constantly worried. I'm constantly fearful. And he said, the version of yourself that will deal with that tragedy, if or when it comes, will be born into existence in that moment. That version of you will have more information, more context, and be better equipped to deal with that event than the version of you today. So you have to trust your future self to solve your future problems. And Emily's mother did recover, and Emily didn't have to suffer through the grief and the loss that she thought she would when she was really young, because it never happened. And she was able to mentally handle that kind of load because she agreed and allowed herself in that moment, when she's scared, when she's fearful, to trust that the future version of herself will know what to do. I will know what to do if my mother dies. I will know what to do if I go through a bad breakup. I will know what to do if I have to pivot and change careers. I trust my future self because she will know what to do if something goes wrong with this podcast. I trust my future self because she will know what to do if a guest cancels, or there's an issue at the studio, or I lose out on a brand deal. I trust my future version of Amanda because I know that she will know what to do. She will have more experience. She will have more wisdom. She will have more integrity and knowledge and skill than I do right now. So until that problem comes to fruition, I don't need to worry about it because future me has it handled. That's where I really wanted this whole full circle to come with my friend, at home right now, is because my friend is not necessarily failing to reach a conclusion. She's learning right now in real time how to deal with uncertainty, how to deal with risk, how to deal with pivoting, and how to trust her future self. She may not know that yet. She may not have the confidence yet that she can do anything that she sets her mind to, but she will, right? Once she takes the first step out, she will. She's getting closer and closer to that future version of herself, right? And because she went through this really tough breakup now, should she ever go through one again, now she knows I'll be okay because my future self will know what to do. My future self will have the wisdom and the experience and the decision-making prowess to figure this out. She will be stronger, more informed, and better equipped than the version of her that's, crashing on my couch right now. And it doesn't feel tangible, right? It doesn't feel accessible. It doesn't feel like she can reach out and be that person yet. But the truth is she doesn't have to have it figured out today, and neither do you. Your future self has got this. If you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty and you don't know where to go next and you don't know what to do or what to say, what to think, how to feel, take that step back. Go through some of the frameworks that we talked about today in this episode. And then at the end, remind yourself, no matter what happens, no matter what contingency plan I come up with, my future self has got this. We always joke, something goes wrong in your regular day-to-day, it's usually not that big of a deal. You go, That's a future Amanda problem. That's a that's a future me problem. That's a future this problem. You're already saying these things. You're already allowing it to exist. You're already pushing that off onto your future self because you know that they will figure it out. They will know what to do. They will solve the problem. This time, really lean into it. The next time you're actually having those concerns and those fears, lean into that. And I know it's really hard, but you can build your your tolerance for uncertainty over time. You can build your tolerance for risk over time. But the way to do that is very similar to like building muscle mass and muscle strength. It's repetition. Repetition removes your doubt. Taking little risks, going through those frameworks next time you have a problem, following through on your decision is the biggest thing. Holding a promise to yourself builds self-trust. You say that you want to act like a certain person, or you want to have more integrity, you want to be more outgoing, whatever it is that you're trying to improve about your life or about yourself, you have to take that step forward to actually do those things. Imagine if I had just stayed home 3 years ago and I had told all my friends and family, oh, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm really interested in this, blah, blah, blah. I've bought all the equipment. I'm going to do it. And then 6 months goes by, a year goes by, 2 years goes by, and I still hadn't started, but I kept talking about it all the time. It would start to sound like I didn't really believe in myself, or I didn't really believe I could do it. And I would be so afraid of what other people would think that I wouldn't actually follow through on it, right? Or I'd be so afraid of the failure that I'd become, because what if I said I wanted to do it and then I did it and then I failed? Everybody would know. Like, how embarrassing is it to try? It's like, actually, the embarrassing thing is not trying at all. Talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, going around and around in circles and never making the decision, that's more harmful than it is good. I want you to just think about the most uncertain season that you've lived through recently, or ever, I suppose. What did you live through? What helped you back then? What came out of it that you couldn't have anticipated? Because that's your evidence. That's your proof of you building this risk tolerance muscle, this uncertainty tolerance muscle. You just didn't call it that in the moment. I know you can do this. I can do this. You can do this. My friend back home, she can do this. She can handle it. I believe in her. I love her. I know that she'll find a way out, and she will find a way back to herself, and she will feel more confident and loved and alive and hopefully appreciated wherever she goes next. When you don't know which direction to go in, ask yourself what the more expansive choice is, not the safer one. Because the one that makes you feel like you are opening something up, that you are cracking into a deeper part of you, rather than closing it off, that's the decision that's going to change your life. It might feel risky, but that's the one that's going to make the biggest difference for you. And I hope that you build up the tolerance and say yes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the show. I hope today's episode gave you a new perspective, or at least helped you feel a little less alone as you're making these tough life decisions and major life transitions or pivots, and ideally helps you get a little less stuck and feel a little less lost than you were before. Rate, review, subscribe, reach out to me via email, submit your listener questions, hello@podcastforthelost.com. You can find me everywhere on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Podcast for the Lost. And remember, wanderers are always welcome.